It's my privilege this morning to introduce to you our first plenary speaker of the week, Putso Nyathi. Putso serves as the Conservation Agriculture Technical Officer for Southern Africa. She's connected with Mennonite Central Committee and the Canadian Foodgrains Bank. She has a wealth of experience from which she's going to be speaking. That experience is rooted in more than 15 years of engagement with smallholder farmers. Putso was connected for 5 years with ICRISAT, and she's going to be talking about 10 years, kind of a retrospective, 10-year retrospective on conservation agriculture programming in 5 particular districts in Zimbabwe. Putso is Zimbabwean, and she has had this opportunity to evaluate the sustainability of these interventions, particularly focusing on what are the barriers to their adoption and what things drive the adoption of CA practices. And then, interestingly, what's the impact of CA practices on the allocation of labor and decision-making around that, which has significant implications for gender roles in agriculture. Putso is young, but looks younger than she is. She suggested that this is one of the things she might like you to know. She is married and the mother of 3 children. The oldest is 16. And so she brings lots of life experience to her sharing as well. We are very honored to have Putso Nyathi here with us today. And Putso, we want to welcome you as you come and share.
I'm honored to be here today to share our experiences as Canadian Foodgrains Bank on the promotion of CA in Zimbabwe. So my presentation is based on an ex-post evaluation that we did in May 2016. So I'll give you just a brief background about Canadian Foodgrains Bank. CFGB is a 15-member organization comprising church organizations that are based in Canada. They work with partnerships in local countries like developing countries, including Zimbabwe. These partners normally are Christian organizations. And the first ever programming that Canadian Foodgrains Bank started was in Zimbabwe, and it was in 2006. At that point, CFGB partnered with Christian Care. Christian Care was a partner of the United Church of Canada. The United Church of Canada is a member of Canadian Foodgrains Bank. So you can see how complicated the relationship is. There is United Church of Canada, which is a member of CFGB. And then UCC partners with a local organization. In this case, it's Christian Care, which was implementing. So there's, in terms of these members of CFGB, they contribute funds to CFGB, and then CFGB then works on how they distribute this to the partners on the ground. So the projects that we evaluated ended in 2014. They started in 2006. In addition to promoting conservation agriculture, these particular projects implemented by Christian Care also supported community seed banks and also the promotion of cover crops. I'll talk more about that as we progress. And then they also promoted the use of lead farmers as an extension strategy. And then another brief background about my position as well. My position is fairly young. I started in 2014. That was after CFGB realized that there was very little coordination among its partner organizations on the ground. So they felt that there was a need to hire technical officers who will ensure that there's networking among the partner organizations. So in 2014, there were 2 extension of CA technical officers that were hired. That was myself and my colleague Neil Miller. I'm sure some of you know him. Neil Miller is based in East Africa, and I work in Southern Africa. And then last year, we added a new CA technical officer, as you can see in those pictures. This technical officer is based in Central and West Africa. So there are now 3 CA technical officers and 1 program officer who's based in Canada at CFGB. So we work together as a team to try and ensure that there's networking among our partners. We also organize yearly conferences among our partners so that they share their experiences on what they are doing on the ground. Where did Christian Care do their work? The map that you are seeing there reflects on the agroecological regions of Zimbabwe. So the 5 districts that you see there where you have the red dots, that is where we sampled the wards on the ground. And then when you see the different colors, you see, is it light green and yellowish? Those places receive very little rainfall. The places where Christian Care was working in were having less than 600 millimeters of rainfall per annum. And rain falls from November until April. So these people have maybe 5 to 6 months of rainfall, and rainfall is very erratic in those areas. Sometimes you get dry spells of 2 weeks or even more. So that's how difficult it is to do crop production in the districts that Christian Care worked in. And then what was the rationale behind Christian Care working in those areas? There were so many problems that were found in those areas. Firstly, soil erosion, which is caused by a lot of plowing. Farmers use the plow to prepare their land. So soil loss is quite a big issue in the district that they were working in. And then generally, the areas where smallholders farmers are found, there's very little soil, poor soil fertility. The soils are inherently infertile. So that's a challenge for crop production. And then the other challenge that farmers are having in those areas is draft power. Farmers in Zimbabwe use cattle or donkeys to pull the plow to prepare their land. But if you don't have a plow, it means you have to wait for your neighbor to finish plowing, and then you can then request. By the time you request, time has gone. And we are talking about a very short season. So timing is very, very crucial when it comes to agriculture production, rain-fed agriculture production. And then the other challenge that Christian Care had to intervene within these districts was over-reliance on food aid. In those districts, Christian Care had been working for quite a number of years, and they were distributing food. But distributing food doesn't get somebody out of hunger. So they felt that to introduce CA, it would be a way of trying to help people get out of hunger. So they wanted to stop the over-reliance on food aid. And then the other challenge that the districts are facing is the access to markets. Most farmers stay in very remote areas. For them to get seed or fertilizer on time, it's very difficult because of infrastructure problems. And then the costs, even if they can find seed or fertilizer in a shop, it may be very expensive for just a rural farmer to buy. And then distance as well. There are some farmers, the market for them is far away for them to be able to go and buy. And then availability of cash. Of late, like as I speak right now, cash circulation in Zimbabwe is a big thing. People cannot access cash. So you can imagine how it is like for people in rural areas. If people in town cannot get cash, what more for somebody in rural areas? So those are some of the challenges that farmers are facing in Zimbabwe. So Christian Care then, to try and address some of those challenges that are faced by smallholder farmers, they introduced conservation agriculture. For the benefit of those who don't know what conservation agriculture is, CAU, we use the definition that was developed by FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, which defines CA as an approach to managing agroecosystems for improved and sustained productivity, increased profits and food security while preserving the environment. So the most important thing is that we want to produce more, but at the same time preserving our soils and our natural environment. That's the whole idea about CA. And then how do we achieve that with CA? So CA is conservation agriculture. CA, I'll be saying CA as we go on, is centered around 3 principles that farmers have to follow. The first principle is to disturb the soil as little as possible. That is minimum tillage. So Christian Care, as they promoted minimum tillage with farmers, they used the planting basin method, which you can see in the picture. The planting basins, these are holes that are dug specifically for farmers to plant directly. Instead of tilling the whole land, they only dig where they are going to put their seed. So they use a hand hoe. It's typically targeted for farmers that don't have livestock like the ones that I've talked about. So they can just use a hand hoe. A hand hoe is a tool that is normally available to most people in most households, even the poor. And also, the other important thing about the planting basins is that you can also apply manure directly into instead of spreading, you use it where it is needed. These planting basins are usually 15 centimeters deep and 15 centimeters wide and stuff. So it's just 15, 15, 15. That's how it's dug. They're supposed to dig them in the dry season so that they have ample time to finish. When the rains come, they are ready. So this is the minimum tillage method that was promoted by Christian Care to all these 5 districts. So there are other options that are available for minimum tillage, where those with draft power they can use. People can use a reaper. I don't know if people have used it. You attach it to the plow beam. You remove the plowshare and attach directly to the plow beam. It doesn't disturb all of the land. As you can see in the first picture, it just disturbs where you are going to plant. That's minimum tillage. And then the second one, they call it a direct seeder. For farmers that are well off, that can afford to buy, they can use a direct seeder to do minimum tillage. So there are many ways that can be done to achieve minimum tillage. Then the second principle is soil cover. Farmers are encouraged to keep the soil as covered as possible. They can use grass, they can use crop residues. Our partner, Christian Care, was encouraging 100% cover, as you can see in the picture. But FAO encourages 30% minimum as cover. And then the third principle is crop rotation or association, that is growing different crops at the same time. So we all know the advantages of growing different crops at the same time. And then other than the 3 principles that we have for CA, Christian Care also promoted the use of locally produced manure. So they encourage farmers to do compost making. They also encourage farmers to save seed, like encourage the use of open pollinated varieties. Instead of hybrid, they can use OPV seed that they can select at the end of the season and then use to plant again. That deals with the problems of going to buy, not having access to markets. And then they also introduced cover crops. I'm sure most people know what cover crops are. Green manure cover crops that are grown for cover and soil fertility. They introduced this at the end of the programming, like in 2013, 2014. And then they also introduced, they encouraged the use of lead farmers, local farmers who were there to train other farmers. So they built the capacity of local farmers so that they can be able to provide knowledge to other farmers around. Why? Because the public extension system is very limited. You have one extension officer working with quite a big number of farmers, and they don't have resources. So using local farmers was a sustainability strategy that they used. So why did we conduct an evaluation? I think this was already been mentioned, that we did this evaluation to try and understand the impacts of the work that was done. What are the drivers and barriers to adoption of CA? How effective were the use of lead farmers in terms of CA promotion? How are we contributing to food security through conservation agriculture? Because that was the major reason why CA was introduced, to address food security concerns. And then to also appreciate the role of government extension officers. They were also being trained. What is the impact of training government extension officers? When Christian Care has left, what is happening? Are people still doing what they were taught? And then we also wanted to assess the impact of CA on women and men. And then what was the methodology? Christian Care was covering quite a number of wards, small areas in each district. So maybe out of 7 wards, we'd select maybe 3. We selected 3 wards in each district where we interviewed farmers. We were using household interviews, and also we did focus group discussions. And then we also talked to key informants like local leadership and government extension officers that were leading in those districts. So this gives us how many people we managed to talk to. We talked to people who were trained and were implementing, people who were trained but were no longer implementing, and people who were trained and not practicing. And then people who were never trained and they were not doing anything. In total, we interviewed about 305 people. And then what did we find? For the people that we interviewed, those that were practicing CA, we found that adoption of the CA principles was very high. As you can see, 95% were still doing minimum tillage. Christian Care is no longer there. Like, it's been 3 years since Christian Care has gone. They are still doing minimum tillage. 79% were still doing mulching. I didn't expect that big figure because mulching is a very big issue. But I was really surprised that people were still able to mulch. It's a big challenge under the conditions that we are promoting CA to mulch, because you need crop residues, which are also used for livestock. So, and also getting grass in a country where you have 7 months of drought, where do you get the grass to put on the? So it was really surprising to see that big figure. And then 81% were also rotating with legumes. So we found that to be very good. To me, I was really impressed to see that, you know, people have still continued to do CA even after we have pulled out. And then when it came to the area allocated to conservation agriculture, this is what we found out. On average, we had 0.5 of a hectare, I don't know, acres, allocated to conservation agriculture. And then on conventional, the plowing, each farmer still had a conventionally plowed plot, and it was on average 1.5 hectares. And then on average, each household would have maybe in total 2.2 hectares. So as we look at this, we can see that CA is still being applied on a smaller scale compared to conventional or to what the farmers have in total. What about the use of open pollinated varieties? We introduced OPVs, farmers were used to hybrid. What we realized was that there were variations between districts. If you look at the district at the end, the one called Nyami Nyami, and you will see that the number of farmers that are using OPVC every season is very high. And the reason there is because that district is the remotest of all. There is no transport, even extension officers are not there. They don't even want to go there because it's difficult. So we felt that there was a success in OPV promotion in that district because of context. But if you look at Gutu, the one at the center there, you will see that there's a different story. And that is because of its location. People there have access, they also have a preference for a particular type of seed, and they also have access to markets. So the issue of OPV seed acceptance really varied among the districts. And then in terms of community seed banks, when I talked about Christian Care promoting community seed banks, I talked about them encouraging farmers to, when they harvest, they bring seed to a common store, right? Where they'll put the seed together. And then at the beginning of the cropping season, they come in and then they share the seed. That didn't work. What we found out is that people were saving seed individually. I harvest, and then I save my seed on my own. The reasons, quality issues. I bring in good quality seed, and then somebody doesn't bring good quality. But when we share, at the end of the day, I don't get the quality that I expected. Secondly, there was also an issue of poor treatment of seed in storage. That's what farmers told us. They were saying they were having those problems. And then there were also social issues. You know, there are certain beliefs among people that if I mix my seed with so-and-so seed, then it might not germinate, it might not do well. You know, those beliefs that people had. That was the bigger one, to say, I can't mix my seed with so-and-so. So that's why people preferred to do it individually. And then the other thing that was overlooked was the issue of drought. If there's a drought, and then you don't get anything from your field, what do you do? Where do you get the foundation seed again? So there was no strategy to say, if people don't harvest anything, how do they start again? So those seed banks flopped whenever there was a drought. And then the other reason was there was no external support. Most farmers still needed somebody to be pushing or to be helping or giving guidance. They had over-relied on Christian Care staff in helping them. So when Christian Care moved out, they didn't really know how to continue. And then when it came to green manure cover crops, I mentioned that they were introduced a little late. What we found that was that farmers most of them were growing cowpeas. That was the main green manure cover crop that they were growing. Others, such as mucuna, leb, pigeon pea, they were no longer growing them. The reasons, some of them didn't know if they could eat them. That's very important. Can I eat leb? If I can eat it, how do I cook it? So that's, other than soil fertility and other issues, a crop has to be beneficial in terms of food. So some of them didn't know that. And also the unavailability of seed around hindered the expansion of GMCCs. So this is something that we still need to work on in terms of addressing soil cover problems. And then what is the contribution of conservation agriculture to food security? There's one quote that I got from a key informant in one of the districts called in Ngai. What he said, in Zimbabwe, if you walk into a household, and then as you look around, you see the houses and stuff, if there is no granary, I don't know whether it's clear, it means this household is not food secure. It's a sign. So this key informant was saying, even in places where there were no granaries, they are now there because of conservation agriculture. That was a loaded statement. So it meant that even people who were not able to feed themselves, after practicing CA, they are able to feed themselves. And we also had farmers were telling us that now I can rely on food from what? From my own harvest, because I practice CA. In the past, I would rely on food aid, but now I can get food from my. And then the other thing that we realized is that there was increased food diversity. Instead of just maize and vegetables, people were also having beans. So there's now a variety in terms of food. So increased food diversity is something that we found to be an impact of CA, because we're encouraging groundnuts, cowpeas, maize, and other different types of crops, which are good for people's health. And then what are the major drivers to CA? When you ask someone, why have you continued to practice CA even when Christian Care has gone away? The first thing they say, there's high yields. Even on a small field, I get something. Even on a drought year, I get something. We get 5 bags or twice more than what I get from a conventional field. That was the major impact of CA to the households that we spoke to, that we are getting high yields from CA. These two farmers, we got this picture from some farmers in Gutu who have 1.5 hectares. I say the average is 0.5, but this couple had 1.5 hectares under CA because they have seen the benefits of doing CA. And then the other benefit that we had, mostly from women, they were saying, even for us without draft power, I can plant on time. So I don't have to wait for my neighbor. I'm in control of my field because I have the implement. And then the other benefit that we had, we're saying, because of the scarcity of inputs, like if I don't have cows, I don't have manure. But because I'm targeting application, it means I'm saving. I'm putting my manure where it's wanted. So they were saying there's a great saving in applying our inputs directly to the planting stations. And then the other thing that we also had, they were saying the soil has also improved, and then there's also moisture conservation, especially from mulching. Most of them were doing CA on homestead. You know, farmers have got fields that are close to the homestead, and then they also have fields far away. So the CA fields were close to the homestead, where they are protected, where they can afford to put mulch, because they saw that mulching was very, very good at moisture conservation. So they said, we saw the benefit of mulching. So if we can't afford on a bigger area, we'd rather do it on the small area. That was one thing that we found. And then there was a case where we had farmers say, I wanted to see if my soil had improved. So what I did, I plowed. Like, why did you plow? No, I wanted to see if it has changed, because you said minimum tillage over time would improve my soil. So to me, it was like, it's interesting to see that people want to see change. That if I'm doing this, is it changing? And it was quite a learning thing to me. And then to the downside of CA, what are the barriers? You can't do a hectare using a hoe or digging basins. There are people who argue that, mostly when you promote CA, we argue that you can start in June, right, to dig basins until October, preparing. But people are saying we have other things to do. And two, during that period, livestock are roaming around. Some of them, they come and destroy our planting basins. So it's a waste of energy. So most farmers were saying it's very, very labor intensive to use the hoe to dig basins. That's why it's a barrier to even area expansion. And then the other barriers that we had was, this is an old lady, right? She's doing CA, but most farmers were saying, when I get older, I don't think I'll continue doing this. Or if I get sick, I don't think I will do this. This is for people who are strong and fit. So that suggests that it's very labor intensive to use that technology. And then the other barrier is, I've already talked that in these systems, they are crop livestock systems. So as you can see in that first picture, that lady, that is a CA field, but already there is livestock eating the crop residues. How do they deal with that? How do we keep our residues and at the same time allowing livestock to feed? Even if I don't have livestock in a community, there is no way I can stop other people's livestock to eat my crop residues. Sometimes, like for example, in a country like Zambia, you become an outcast. There's no fence, but the moment you fence your field, you are excluding yourself from the community. So that's something that we still need to understand, to say, okay, it's a crop livestock system and people work here, they are together as a community. How do we deal with that? And then there were cases, as you can see, there's a bunch of grass there. Farmers that were doing CAE were supposed to be cutting grass throughout the whole season to keep the soil covered. So in one area, they would go and cut grass in an area that is reserved for livestock. Like in other places, they have grazing areas that are reserved for livestock. So these farmers would go and cut grass there. That caused conflict to say, no, your CA farmers are busy cutting grass that is meant for livestock feeding. Those were some of the challenges or things that were stopping farmers from achieving. And then what were the gender impacts? What we learned from women is that most of them got leadership positions in terms of being lead farmers, and that increased their access to extension services. That was a very big impact. And then they also felt that they were now in control. Women felt that they were now in control of farming activities because of the use of the hoe. The hoe is considered a woman's tool. So once the tillage system is hand hoe, it means the woman is in charge. So they felt like they were now in control of the whole system. And then the other benefits that we had was that increased production. It means as a household, it benefits the whole household, both men and men, because there is increased production. And then on the downside, we just learned that CA shifted labor to women. Like if you don't mulch your field, it means there is more weeds. And who does the weeding? It's the women. If you're going to do mulching, who goes out to look for mulching material? It's the women's job. So they felt that in terms of workload, it was increasing women workloads in terms of weeding and mulching and even land preparation. And then when you talk about the extension strategies that we use, like the use of lead farmers, what are lead farmers doing after CA has left? We try to understand that. What we found out was that 61% of respondents said lead farmers were still providing technical support, which is very good. It means people are still getting some knowledge locally from their peers. But the only difference that we realized is that instead of lead farmers visiting farmers door to door, it was now demand-driven. A farmer comes to the lead farmer asking for advice, and it's still a good thing. And the other thing that we heard was that lead farmers were also providing moral support, like encouragement to whoever was starting CA. And also, they were also coordinating some activities. In some districts, we also found that the government extension officers were using those lead farmers that were selected in the project to still work with local farmers. And that was the greatest impact that I found from that. And then in terms of government extension support, I would like to say Zimbabwe, in terms of government extension support, is still fairly good compared to other Southern African countries that I work in. At least you can find an extension officer in every district, although they don't have the resources. What we found out is that farmers were still getting technical support on CA from the government extension system. So it was good that we involved them, we trained them as Christian Care. And then we also learned that Christian Care introduced planting basins, the hand-hold tillage. But the government was now introducing reaping. So in addition to just the basics of CA, the government was coming in, helping farmers to also start other tillage methods other than the one that we had trained them. And then they also provide inputs and seed for CA. And CA is also part and parcel of their duties. That's what we learned from the extension staff. So in terms of CAE sustainability, we feel it's very great because the government is also involved. So what did we conclude from the evaluation? For me, I see evidence of adoption. Our Canadian Foodgrains Bank definition of adoption is when something becomes part and parcel of you without external push. And I saw that. People are doing CA on a small scale without no NGO providing anything. They're just doing, it has become part and parcel of their farming system. So to me, that's adoption. So there's evidence of that. And the main driver of adoption is higher yields. CA has proven to be producing higher yields than the conventional way of doing things. What we also concluded was that due to the challenges of labor, you find that CA has been limited to very small fields. So area expansion is limited, and if we are thinking about land degradation, it means in terms of reclaiming our lands, we are still limited to small areas. But we want to encourage technologies that will result in expansion of area under CA. And we also have learned that, yes, lead farmers are there, but their roles is now demand-driven. It's no longer door-to-door visits. And also that government extension support is still continuing in the districts. What do we recommend? What we recommended was, as development agents, when we go out there to promote technology, in this case, it was minimum tillage. You find people are already plowing, right? And then you go there, you start telling them to go back to the hole, right? So in this case, we should have come up with minimum tillage methods that were appropriate for that particular audience. Fine, I may not have livestock, right? But I don't enjoy using the hand hoe. It's not really nice at all. So labor-saving technologies are really, really appropriate. People are already somewhere. So let's take them from there rather than taking them back. So the other thing is to understand context. I already spoke about the adoption of OPV in those areas, that it was context specific. So we need to understand the challenges are not the same across all, even within a community, the challenges vary. So as we go there, let's understand the context of each and every place that we work in. The other context issue is about crop livestock systems. When people promote CA, They don't even think that there's livestock that is being produced. They don't even think that manure comes from livestock production. They're busy just thinking, I'm doing CA and I need mulching. I don't care where you get it, you know. So we need to be thinking about how do we integrate conservation agriculture into the farming system that is already there. That's how it would make it successful. And then also, we need to address mulching challenges like GMCCs, green manure cover crops. We're going to be very important in addressing that challenge. We should continue to be promoting them. And then targeting the poor. We realized that CA in these districts was targeting poor people. So it gives a connotation that CA is for the poor. So we need to be thinking beyond just targeting poor people when we are promoting technologies. Yes, our mandate is food security, but if there is a technology that is good enough even for richer people, why not open up to everyone? We can try it. And then I've already mentioned about addressing livestock issues, fodder production. How do we include that in our programming? And also involving local stakeholders, like the people, the local structures, leadership, and stuff is very, very important for the success of the project. If community seed banks were started with involvement of local leaders and other existing local structures in the communities, I'm sure they would have continued. I thank you. Are there questions? Yeah, it's okay.
We have a few minutes for questions. I don't know if we have, okay. Questions, there's a mic over here.
Good morning, my name is Cecilia Gonzalez, I work with ECHO. My question is, you mentioned that there was increased dietary diversity. Did you get a chance to measure that or use like a specific tool to measure that? And also on the issue of being labor intensive, do you have any thoughts about how, if there are ways to improve that or remedy that to, I mean, I don't know that there are ways, but just any thoughts on how to promote conservation agriculture while it is also very labor intensive?
Okay, the first one on dietary diversity. What we did was we were asking farmers, we had a list of food groups on what they consumed in the last 7 days. So what we realized was that in the food groups that we had seen being consumed in the last 7 days, there was a lot of diversity, although it was mainly plant-related food. There was less of animal-related food. So that's how we collected the data for diversity. And then in terms of labor-intensive, I think strategies like appropriate technologies for minimum tillage, like I already mentioned. Reaping takes less time than actually plowing. So that would be another labor-saving thing. But if you reap and you do a bigger area of CA, it means you need a lot of mulching material, which may not be available. So then it means it increases the amount of weeding that you would need. How do we deal with weed pressure? In Zambia, most of the farmers use herbicides, but most farmers cannot afford. In Zimbabwe, we tried to conscientize farmers about herbicides, and they were not interested. But some projects are starting to promote intercropping with cover crops. Those cover crops, they cover the soil quite quickly, so they suppress weeds. So in terms of that labor challenge of weeding, you can do that by introducing cover crops. So appropriate technologies for minimum tillage and also the use of cover crops and herbicides could really help on the labor issues.
Thank you for your presentation. My name's Edwin Dysinger. And at the end, in the recommendations, you had said that you would like to introduce other methods of tillage than the hand hoe. And I was just wondering, do you have any ideas or thoughts on what other methods of tillage might be available?
Okay. We are not working with CNFA right now, but we have other CFGB-funded projects in Zimbabwe where they've tried to introduce the reaper and the direct seeder. Can you please show that? So, sorry, I just want to show you what we are trying to improve. So you see those two tillage methods. The first one is the ripper, and then the second one is the direct seeder. Our projects introduced those two to farmers. And what we realized is that the farmers preferred using the ripper. Why? Because the ripper is not so different from what they are used to, like the plow. Then the direct seeder, they really liked it, but in terms of cost, it was prohibitive. So what other people are doing in other countries for minimum tillage methods like these ones, they provide higher services. Like in Zambia, people do higher services for reaping, and farmers are willing to pay because they are used to using that kind of method where they can hire out services. So those are some of the tillage methods that we are trying to encourage farmers to use. So it really depends on context. If you go to Mozambique, where farmers are actually using the hand hoe right now, or in Malawi, they are using the hand hoe for digging, for plain preparation, it's not a big issue using the hand tillage method because they are used to it. But for a country like Zimbabwe, where people already have graduated from the hand hoe, that's when you need to improve. So there are so many tillage methods that are available that are quite simple to use. I didn't have the pictures for some. There's another one called the leaf seeder or the jab planter. You don't have to dig. You just go onto a crop residue and then you just start planting. As long as you have crop residues, it's very easy to do than digging the planting basins.
One more question down here in the front.
Can you hear me? I have a loud voice. I just want to clarify that first picture is that
Yes, the reaper.
Is that part of a soil minimum tillage soil preparation?
Yes.
Looks like a plow.
Yes.
So how is that different from plowing and that one? Is that still less disturbance, that one compared to the plowing? 'Cause
Yes.
It looks the same.
You see the last picture there on draft power challenges there?
This one,
Yes, this one.
is that a plowing?
There it's plowing. Like they would just tend the whole soil, right?
Yeah. They plow 2 or 3 times.
Or something like that, yes. There you just go one line, right? The space in between, you didn't do anything. You just went to where you are going to plant, right?
Yeah.
In that slide. So that's,
They can still use the plow, just do one probably line and do the other one here.
we have cases where they've used what they call the plowshare. I'm not really an engineering specialist, but there's a case where people use the plowshare. I don't know what they remove the beam. The beam, like the stuff that throws away the soil. That's what is not needed. So we don't want to pulverize the soil in the process. So you can open the lines, but we also don't want to be, making the soil pulverized. Yes.
Yeah. That will be last. That will be a real big challenge, like in the Philippines, because if you say how to prepare the soil, pulverize the soil. That's what even the government is teaching.
Exactly.
So it's gonna be a
Changing the mindset. Yes.
Last question there in the back.
Hi, I'm Bob Morikawa from Plant with Purpose. I was really interested to hear what's happening with the lead farmers, that their services are becoming demand-driven. I'm curious, are they voluntary? Are they being compensated by the community? Are they being compensated by the government? What happens to them in terms of their services?
What I didn't mention is that when there was Christian care, these lead farmers were being given a stipend to do the job, right? But now, they're just doing it as a community service. And as we are moving on with our projects, what we are encouraging is to say somebody who volunteers to say, I want to help my community without having to be compensated is what we are encouraging. So these lead farmers that are being used by government extension staff at the moment, they are not getting paid, but they are willing to be providing information for free. So that is one good thing about them. They are no longer moving, they are not mobile anymore, but they still are available for someone who needs advice. Thank you.
Please join me in appreciating Putso Nyathi.